just like make sure you know where your money's going, and you'll probably discover a lot of things that you didn't know. And once you've got that sorted, then start like putting money away. First build up your emergency fund, then start trying to actually build wealth, right? Build that kind of nest egg so that when you do retire, that you're one of that 6% that are actually, comfortable.
Well covered, for sure. Hi, welcome to Frankly Speaking, another episode of us talking frankly about money, all things relating to money. Joined today, we have an old friend and a guru of finance, Sebastian Patel. Seb, it's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be here.
Great, guys. Well, today we're going to be talking about how to manage your family's finances. And obviously, although a lot of the topics will relate to a family, I think it's important to know that, if you're an individual just starting out your life and career, you've got to think about it as your household finances. So what should you be doing, whether that's singular or collective, to be able to just like get on top of your money? So let's kick it off. How would you go about budgeting? Like, what do you think is the importance of budgeting, and how would you approach it, if you've never done it before in your life?
Yeah, I think budgeting is key. I mean, it's step one, right? You need to know money coming in versus money going out, right? Money coming in generally is a lot easier because, it's generally like your after-tax salary, unless you've got a few side hustles or unless you're earning investment income from, some investments that you have. That pretty much constitutes like money coming in. Money going out is where it gets a bit tricky, right? Because that's your rent, it's your food, it's your water, it's electricity, it's your entertainment. The key sort of budget part of budgeting is to like know where your money's going, and the 50-30-20 split is often one that's quite well used. So if you're new to budgeting, first thing to do is like write down like money coming in, money going out, and then categorize the money going out. And 50-30-20 that I was talking about is 50% to like what you really need to spend on, 30% on wants, and 20% on like entertainment and that kind of. No, that's wrong. It's 50% on like what you need to survive, 30% on your wants, and 20% for saving and like repaying debt.
Yeah. I mean, I think I love that framework, the 50-30-20. I think what happens a lot is people confuse wants and needs.
Well,
right?
I just did there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, where a need is, a roof over your head, and food, right? But do you need to shop all the time at Woolworths, for example? That's more of a want than a need. You could buy the same core supplies of bread, milk, and, cereal, for example, at ShopRite and probably pay like half the price. So, yeah, I think I've always thought that just be as honest as you can when you go through that process about thinking really what are your needs, and then cut a line and say, okay, but I like eating out, and like, I like, Woolies hot cross buns. That's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, just be conscious about that difference.
Yeah, I mean, no one's asking you to eat Pro Vita every day, right? You still need to like live your life and enjoy yourself. It's just you need to know where your money's going, and that's a key part of budgeting.
Yeah.
So get that spreadsheet out, start like segmenting like where the money's going, and you need to understand. That's the key thing.
Yeah. And I think one other thing just to mention both from an individual and a household perspective is, there are different forms of income. I mean, you touched on it. Obviously, for most people, it's just the salary that you're getting paid. But, some people might have a bit of rental income. Some people might have a little side hustle that they're running. Obviously, that's going to affect that side of the equation, both you and your spouse or your partner's kind of income. So always, I would also add, like, think about opportunities where you can see to grow that, right? Obviously, we're an investment platform. Investment can derive income, whether that's interest or dividends, So, yeah, always look for the opportunities, I think, of growing that income space would be something else that I'd add,
Yeah, you can also ask for a raise. But yeah, it's probably not going to get you very far.
Yeah. And what do you think is should people invest in trying to actually create a document, like create I don't know, the outcome of this analysis, like, is it a static thing? Is it a dynamic thing? Is it worth the effort of trying to stay on top of kind of ins and outs on a monthly basis?
I think it doesn't need to be too fancy. I think just start with a spreadsheet. You can use, tracking tools like 20 to 7. That's like dynamic. They do a lot of the work for you. But if you're just starting off, you don't need to get too fancy. Just like put it on a spreadsheet and track it, right? Every month, just ensure that you know where your money is going. Is it matching the 50, 30, 20 or whatever variation of that split that you set for yourself? And then, just make sure that you know what's going on. If once you get into a decent cadence and, you feel like you've got it under control, then maybe you don't need to look at it every month, every quarter, every 6 months or whatever. But until you're comfortable with that, I think you should be tracking it every month.
And I think something that's so important when it comes to like managing household finances is this idea of habits, and if you can get yourself into a habit of just knowing, right, what's happening, right? What are the ins, what are the outs? Like nothing is blind to you. Nothing should be blind to you. It's your money, right? So like, know what debit orders will come off your account, what day of the month.
Well, that's part of the budgeting, right? So that when you can understand like where money's going out. So some debit orders that are hidden away that you forgot about. Once you start tracking it and say, okay, I haven't used this subscription in 6 months. I haven't used this product and haven't been to the gym or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Then you can start cutting and reapplying those funds into something more worthwhile.
Totally. And I think something that's linked with a habit, but obviously for a lot of people is a very big deal, is debt. Most people have some form of debt, whether that's a big thing like a home loan where you've used to buy your a property, a house, a flat, whatever. Probably maybe car financing as well, with credit card or store facility. So maybe I'd just love to what do you think? How do you differentiate between good debt and bad debt? Some people throw those terms around, but I don't think a lot of people understand what that means. And then what would you recommend are like good habits about, managing debt?
Okay. Yeah, I think good debt is generally debt that you've incurred or you've taken on in order to buy an asset, right? And a productive asset. So like something that's going to potentially rise in value. So like your home loan is generally good debt.
Considered good debt.
Whereas even though your car loan might be, you're buying an asset, you're generally buying a depreciating asset. So that's not great debt. And any debt that's linked to consumption, right? Credit card debt where you've, gone on a holiday or bought something that doesn't really have any tangible value. That's considered bad debt, right? There are different tactics around like paying off debt. Some people try and pay the smallest ones first. I think it's called the snowball method. And then get to the bigger ones in time. Generally, for me, it makes sense to pay your more expensive debt off first, right? And that's like your credit card, which can be very expensive. And I think one good habit to have in place is trying like installment debt, like your house, like your car. If you can, try and pay more than the minimum installment, right? You'll save yourself a mountain of interest over time. If your installment's 5,000 Rand and you can afford to pay 6,000, then pay the 6,000 or 7,000, because installments are often linked to interest rates at the time. And we've seen now when COVID came and interest rates reduced, those installments dropped quite a bit, which, a lot of people had a bit more cash in their pockets. But now with interest rates gone up a lot, like those installments have gone up. So people that were paying a bit more, the impact is a bit less for them. But if they were keeping to the minimums, it's, the increase is quite substantial. I read somewhere that like your installment would have gone up by about 40% or something. And that's just because interest rates have gone up.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, for me, it's interesting. I've two minds, so the way I deal with good debt and the way I deal with bad debt is very different. So for the bad debt, I like literally have an audit. I've got a clear idea what interest rate is associated with that consumptive debt. So in that sense, like the priority list, like, okay, I maybe have a store card and a credit card. The credit card is charging me 20%, right? The store card is maybe clicking over at 12. Okay, so if I do have an exposure to both of them, say 1,000 Rand in each, I know that the credit card is going to be costing me more, right? So my priority list in terms of where I'm going to pay off my bad debt is linked with the interest that I'm exposed to in that particular space. And just talking about the habits, I got really burnt with having too much credit card debt when I was a student. I somebody gave me a credit card and be like, free money, I was like, great, let's go travel. And the problem is that it became such a burden. I actually couldn't manage repaying the debt. There was so much interest being charged every single month, and it really scared me. It took me a long time to get that off my chest, so to speak. So since then, I've got into a habit. I pay my credit card down every single month, right? And I have, made that a practice I don't want to shake.
Because credit cards also can be a very useful working capital tool, right? If you stick to the payment plan. I mean, it's money that you can use for free for like whatever 8 weeks or whatever, right? But like you say, if you need to pay it back, otherwise it can become very expensive.
Yeah. And then the only other thing, just to mention on that, is on the good debt side, is you're so right. I mean, like a lot of people should maybe think about, what is the cost of capital, right? So every good loan, like to buy a house, there's an interest rate, you're going to pay it off for 20 years. More or less, as far as I understand, it's pretty much double the cost of the loan, right, over a 20-year period. So in effect, you are paying twice the purchase price for your property over a 20-year period. If you're able to pay that back in a shorter period, you're obviously reducing that total cost of capital. So without a doubt, I completely agree with you. Like if you have spare money, always think about putting it into those big kind of appreciating assets, because it's just going to mean you're decreasing the total sort of cost of capital, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, one thing just to note as well, that if you do pay more in your bond, you're effectively earning the return. So let's say your bond is priced at 10%, you're putting in extra money into your bond. It's almost like you earning 10% yourself, right? And that's an after-tax amount. So yeah, I mean, that return, when you think about it, is actually very good. And if you have an access bond, then sometimes, if you've got an emergency, you can either dip in there, or if you've got a separate emergency fund, which a lot of people like to separate, like, their loan on their house and actually have a designated emergency fund, which we, strongly suggest to our customers. That's another alternative. But yeah, just paying that extra, whether it's an access loan or not, just helps you in the long run, really cut the interest on. 100%.
Let's turn the conversation to investing now. And obviously, for most people, when they think about investing, in the one mind, they've got sort of their retirement, and sometimes that might be formalized through your work as a sort of retirement annuity. And then there's like the other stuff, whether it's your savings, an emergency fund, or, if you're a frank customer, you're putting some money aside for whatever goal is important to you. But yeah, what would you advise is a good way to think about investing in those sort of like, two different buckets?
Yeah, I mean, so there's discretionary investing, so that's the product that we offer, the Satrix product, where, you can come in and out as you please. There's no real consequences, and there might be some capital gains tax consequences if you make a profit. There's also the tax-free option, right, which is, frustrates me, like how a lot of people sell tax-free products. It should be something that's like only second to your retirement RA or your pension provident fund. It's something that you should be investing in shares, products that have got high exposure to shares, and never touching it, right? Because the purpose of that is for you to really max out your exposure every year, and so ensure that you never pay any tax on that, right? But I see some places selling like interest-bearing money market tax-free products, which is a waste of time, because most people in South Africa have got 23,800. If you're under 65, you can earn interest of up to 23,800 rand without paying any tax, right? Which at current rates is like having 300,000 rand earning you interest, which not many people do, right? So what's the point of a money market tax-free product? And then having your retirement product next to that, right? So I think there's a time and a place for all of them. As we know, only 6% of South Africans can retire comfortably, and what comfortably means is like on the same standard of living. So retirement, is key. You just need to be, again, in a product that where the fees are low and got high exposure to equities, because as we know, history has shown us that equities are very good performing asset class, and that's where you need to be generally for your retirement to make yourself money. We put out a retirement calculator not so long ago, and I'm sure a lot of people would have been a bit scared to see the results. We asked people, their age, how much they've got in retirement funding, and it projects for them, like what they need in order to retire. And yeah, the numbers are scary.
Yeah, and I think something you touched on there, but it's definitely, I think it's definitely not spoken about enough, are fees, right? And I think a lot of product providers don't do a great job about disclosing their fees and making the fees very transparent. So a lot of people get into products, especially some products which have these tax wrappers around them, which are high in fees, right? And then it's a pain to get out. It's like so most people kind of live with that. What would you say are kind of like good tips for people to think about when it comes to fees, and how to what to compare, what to look for? Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, but it's also not easy for the man on the street to understand fees sometimes, because some product providers, again, they try and hide fees. So the one thing that customers must do is understand what fees they're paying. Are they paying fees to an advisor? There'll be the asset management fee. There's different ways of charging fees. Are there fees on entering when they're buying or when they're selling? Fees can appear at very various stages of buying an asset. So it's just to understand where those costs are, and obviously trying to minimize those costs. Because if you're paying a percentage every time you're buying and selling, then stop buying and selling, right? To just buy and hold.
And hold.
Yeah,
it's interesting. And another thing which good friends of mine actually asked me over to kind of chat to them about their household finances, and they had multiple retirement funds and multiple provident funds, and I was like, wow, why do you have so many? Why isn't there just one, right? I think they weren't aware that obviously they were paying admin fees for all of the different funds that they have open, and that actually consolidation can be a good thing. So I don't know, it's an idea, but keen to hear your thoughts, where I suppose as it relates to a lot of your personal finances, my personal philosophy now is trying to keep it as simple as possible. Don't have 10 different credit cards, right? Don't have 10 different store cards. Have one, right? Don't have 10 different investment accounts scattered over a bunch of different places. Try simplify it down to okay, there's one place where I can manage my money, my investments. I get one place where I'm going to go see what's happening with my expenses, the income and the budgeting side. So you just reduce a sort of a burden of managing money, right?
And probably reducing your costs, right? Because like you're saying, these different products often have different base fees, right? So having one where sometimes you get economies of scale as well. Some products, the more money you have in a product, it becomes cheaper, on a sliding scale. So that's another thing to consider, right? If you can consolidate, sometimes you end up paying less fees.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about, and it's obviously if you're just starting off your career, you don't have to really talk to anybody else. It's your personal finances and your personal money. But as being in a relationship, and having a little daughter now, we as a family, my wife and I, have had to talk about money and how we're going to manage money. And I think it's important there that you think about having some guiding principles. So the simplicity principle, the tracking principle, just knowing what's going on. And then the other thing, which is, again, I think a habit we've tried to form, is sort of a regular check-in. So once every 3 months, we actually have a financial dinner where we sit down and talk quite frankly about both our personal situation and then obviously what's happening at a household level. I don't know, any other sort of thoughts or comments when it comes to sort of about
No, I mean, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, money matters often can fracture relationships, right? So if you can get ahead of that, it's, it sounds good. And now that you've got an extra mouth to feed, you have to take into consideration education, and which is a big expense in today's world, especially if you're gonna go sort of the private route, right? Because those fees cost a lot.
Yeah, 100%. I think something we haven't spoken about, we touched on it very briefly, but it's the idea of having an emergency fund, right? I think, the last time I checked, a lot of households are feeling anxious about not having enough, or feeling very financially insecure, that like if there was a death in the family or some emergency that actually they'd have to liquidate a lot of their savings, that they wouldn't be able to account for that. So what do you think is a good strategy of thinking of, or going about setting up an emergency fund, at a household level?
Yeah, I mean, an emergency fund is there, like the name says, right, for an emergency, whether it's a burst tire, something flooding in the house or whatever. It's an unexpected, either single event or like alternatively, like you lose your job, right, and that source of income is not there anymore. So again, the guiding principle is, I think, 3 to 6 months worth of your costs, like in a easily accessible account. And I think that just buys you time, right, for the scenario where maybe you lose your income, lose your job. But I mean, also then provides that cushion for unexpected single expenses. So yeah, I think it's key. Again, there's often a debate, like, should you do that versus repaying debt, especially if it's like very expensive debt. And sometimes it depends on, like what makes you sleep better at night, right? It's often like personal circumstance, personal preference. So if you can try and do both, do both. But yeah, doing one over the other is not necessarily right or wrong, but if you can do both, that's best case.
Fair enough. The last thing, which I think affects not everyone, but a lot of people, is insurance, right? Whether that's insurance for your car or your house and its contents, or insurance for if something happens to you, right? As an actuary, what do you think are good ways to think about how to insure yourself? And again, what principles do you think people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, insurance is kind of like a grudge purchase, right? Because you're paying it, and almost hoping that you never need it. But when you do need it, then you're happy that you have it, right? If it's like a car accident and all of a sudden it's 50,000 or 100,000, that if you didn't have the insurance, then and your emergency fund wasn't there or wasn't enough, then you're in trouble, right? Similarly, if you've got a family and you pass away, and if you didn't have life insurance, then your children and your partner are also in trouble, right? So yeah, it's a strange one. Again, I think I'll go back to the like sleeping well at night kind of philosophy, right? If you have got something in place and it's kind of enough and it helps you be comfortable, then that's fine, right? If you don't and you're like anxious every night, then that's a problem. You should probably start plugging those gaps. Some people are overinsured, some people are very underinsured, right? So it's trying to find that middle ground so that you're not paying a lot more than you should, and you're also not like underinsuring yourself.
Yeah. No, I think the sleeping at night principle is a very good principle. Are there any other things you think are worthwhile discussing when it comes to sort of managing your finances as a household?
No, I think we've covered it. I think the main thing if you haven't started, is like, and I'll say it again, it's just like make sure you know where your money's going, and you'll probably discover a lot of things that you didn't know. And once you've got that sorted, then start like putting money away. First build up your emergency fund, then start trying to actually build wealth, right? Build that kind of nest egg so that when you do retire, that you're one of that 6% that are actually comfortable.
Well covered, for sure. Well, that's the end of this week's session on Frankly Speaking. Thanks for listening, and I hope you learned something today. All the best.